Hi everyone, this is John and I welcome you back to another episode of the Subcontinent. Our program aims to address important issues in the subcontinent which affect the governments, people, organizations and the region of South Asia as a whole. We will try to explain the issues, break down controversies surrounding them and try to have some external perspectives from experts and people.
In this edition of the Subcontinent, we are going to talk about the International Quds Day across the subcontinent. And we shall take a look at the Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians and the role of world's Muslims and non-Muslims in the actualization of the Palestinian cause.
Since 1947, when the British mandate ended on Palestine, Israel has committed crimes against the Palestinians that are unprecedented in modern history. Palestinians are humiliated, kidnapped, tortured, and killed in their own land while struggling with this new type of colonization in the name of settlements. Many global organizations, including the European Union, the United Nations, and the International Court of Justice, recognize these settlements as illegal, but nobody seems to do anything about them.
Every year on the International Quds Day, Muslims and non-Muslims across the subcontinent hold protests to further the Palestinian cause and end the Israeli occupation. Quds Day is an opportunity to unite all the Islamic community behind this beacon of hope and leads the Ummah to subcontinental unity and even global unison.
और हम लोग जो हमारे मुसलमान हुक्मरान हैं, बिलखसूस हमारे जो सऊदी अरब ब्लॉक के लोग हैं, ये लोग जो है ज़ाती मफादात के चक्कर में, ज़ाती फ़ायदों के चक्कर में जो है ये लोग उन पे प्रेशर नहीं बिल्ड करते हैं। देखिए अभी हर मुल्क में सऊदी अरब में सफारत खाना खुलना, यूएई में सफारत खाना खुलना इसराइल का, ये मुसलमानों के मुंह पर एक तमाचा है कि जैसे हम पाकिस्तान में अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह हमारे पासपोर्ट पर लिखा हुआ है कि हम हर जगह जा सकते हैं सिवाय इसराइल के। हमें एक वाज़िया पैगाम देना चाहिए। जब तक मुस्लिम उम्मत जो है वाज़िया पैगाम नहीं देती इसराइल को और सोनी ताकतों को कि हम मुसलमान एक इंच भी इस मकसद से पीछे नहीं हटेंगे, तब तक मैं समझता हूं कि फ़लस्तीन का मसला हल नहीं हो सकता।
However, Palestinians remain one of the most oppressed communities in the world, while the world tends to remain silent. Many countries and governments that call themselves torch-bearers of freedom and liberty are silent. Even though US has vetoed more than 20 UN resolutions for Israel and bullied most governments into remaining silent, millions of people from all around the world, including the subcontinent, mark the International Quds Day as a symbol of resistance and protest against the illegitimate Israeli regime and its crimes against the Palestinians.
What we see that in Iran and its neighboring countries and some of the European and West countries where some substantial number of Muslims are residing for a couple of decades, the voice in favor of Palestine under the banner of Quds Day had been gradually increased, which is a very good sign.
The fate of the Palestinian cause is especially interconnected with the people of the Asian plateau. The history of occupation and exploitation in the western and eastern parts of the continent share uncanny similarities. The Indian subcontinent can play a weighty role in better actualization of the Palestinian cause. In addition to the Indian and Pakistani Muslims who have been supporting a free Palestine for a long time, myriads of ethno-linguistic and religious majorities and minorities of the region have also voiced some sort of support for it.
Every Quds Day, millions of people all around the world, including the West, hold large protest rallies against the policies of the Zionist regime. Although the COVID pandemic has made many of these protests virtual, the agony in the lives of Palestinians has become more real. The heinous crimes of Israel are not emotionally charged overstatements. Israeli oppression is well documented. Only in 2014 alone, more than 2,300 Palestinians were killed, and so far, more than 65,000 Palestinian citizens are said to have been killed by the Israeli forces in total.
इस सिलसिले में बैनुल-अक़वामी सतह पे ख़ास तौर पर हमारे जो इंटरनेशनल फोरम है उस पर और हमारे उलमा को और हम मीडिया को भी इस तरफ से ख़ुसूसी तवज्जो करनी पड़े और इस मसले को उजागर करना चाहिए।
Gaza is under complete blockade since 2007. Almost 2 million people are under constant threat of bombardment of even their schools and hospitals. They face a famine with no money or clean water amid the deadly outbreak of the coronavirus. Then, when Palestinians protest, Israeli forces mercilessly fire live ammunition at them, killing children, women, journalists, medical aid workers, and even handicapped people.
कुछ के हवाले से ये बात करना इंतहाई ज़रूरी है कि हमारा क़िबला अव्वल वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस और इसकी आज़ादी बहुत ज़रूरी है और तमाम उम्मत मुहम्मदिया को चाहिए कि वो इज्तिमाई तौर पर इसके बारे में और इसका सलूशन निकाला जाए और अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा को इसका बावर करवाया जाए कि इस मसले का जल्द अज जल्द कोई सलूशन निकाला जाए।
Israel has now increased the occupation of the West Bank territory. Israelis keep forcing native Arab Muslims out of their homes before bulldozing their property, only to build new settlements. They do this even though the settlements are considered illegal, and Israel has been declared an apartheid regime by UN and prominent international leaders, as well as human rights organizations from all around the world.
Seeing Quds Day as the great unifier that it is can also help find more feasible solutions for other problems of the subcontinental Islamic population. Imagine what feats of human accomplishment might be possible if India, Pakistan and Bangladesh and the rest of South Asia act as one. With that scope of support and cooperation, even the complex, intractable issues of the Muslim world, including Kashmir or Rohingya, seem solvable.
Since the early years of the 20th century, colonial powers have been masters of the so-called divide and rule dogma to prolong their rule. The partition of Palestine to create the Zionist entity in the midst of the 20th century occurred just 1 year after British India was partitioned to create Pakistan. It is always seen as the legacy of British imperialism in South Asia. The Israeli regime illegitimately and illegally took control of Palestine with the help of imperial superpowers and expelled millions of Palestinians from their homes, while kept the rest as hostages in their own lands. The people of the subcontinent can sympathize with the pains that Palestinians feel as a result of the same policy of division, which is exacerbating disarray in the Islamic community to flare up the conflicts around the globe in order to avert attention from the current issues of the Muslim world. Reminding us the roots and similarities in today's world problems, the Quds Day is when we become mindful that Palestine can be a key to enable the Muslims to stand behind each other for a greater cause, a global unity.
The Muslims in the subcontinent, they consider it very compulsory, and they think one of their most important obligation to concerned about the Palestinian Muslims when they see about the different kind of the Israeli aggression and the injustices towards the innocent Palestinians. So there is always a very strong voice that has been raised from the subcontinent Muslims, and they always support the Palestine cause, and they always have a very strong sentiments for the Palestinian Muslims.
हम मुश्किल तरीन हालात में भी फ़लस्तीन के मज़लूमों के साथ खड़े हैं और अमेरिका और इसराइल को ये पैगाम देना चाहते हैं कि आपके तमाम हरबे शिकस्त खा गए हैं, आपका मीडिया शिकस्त खा गया है, आप क़िबला अव्वल को और फ़लस्तीन के मज़लूमों को मुसलमानों के दिल से नहीं निकाल सकते।
और ये जान ले दुश्मन कि कभी भी मिल्लत इस्लामिया ना अमेरिका ना इसराइल से घबराई है, हमेशा से मज़लूमों की हमायत के लिए हम लोग निकले हैं।
और इंशाअल्लाह ये सिलसिला आगे बढ़ता रहेगा और एक दिन ज़रूर आएगा जब आलमी इस्तिकबार अमेरिका इसराइल रुसवा होंगे, उन्हें शिकस्त होगी और क़िबला अव्वल आज़ाद होगा।
As far as the Pakistan is concerned, they retaliated, and especially in last 1 decade, they have retaliated their stand for not accepting Israel as a nation, and they are in support of Palestine freedom. If we see the recent statements of Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, but their ties with the Muslim world, in Arab world, which have ties with Israel, there's no, we do not see any complete picture, any right picture when the Pakistan raised its voice for Palestine freedom.
The call for Palestinian freedom by the late father of the Islamic Revolution, Imam Khomeini, has been echoed throughout the subcontinent ever since. The father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi, has also famously said that Palestine belongs to the Palestinians in the same sense that England belongs to the English or France to the French. Quds Day is an epitome of unanimity among the Muslims, as well as all the oppressed human beings would hopefully ripple out across the subcontinent, throughout Asia, and finally all over the world.
Protesting for the rights of the oppressed people of Palestine is not just a duty, it is a moral reaction by every human who has a conscience. But if people all around the world protest against Israel, the regime calls them the anti-Semitic, despite the fact that even the UN describes Israel an apartheid regime, and Jewish people all around the world condemn the systematic, institutionalized discrimination against Palestinians based on religion and ethnicity.
अमेरिका, इसराइल और दीगर जालिमों को ये पैगाम दिया जाता है कि हम अमीर कायनात की उस हुक्म की ताबेदारी करते हुए कि जालिम के खिलाफ और मजलूम की हिमायत में अपना किरदार अदा करो, अपना किरदार अदा कर रहे हैं.
This is the message to the Israel and the Americans to make an end to the innocent killing of the people and the innocent children of the Palestine as well as of the Yemen as well.
Al-Quds Day is one of the major dedication and the day in which the Muslims around the world actually they pledge for the rights of the Palestinians, because if you see after the Balfour Declaration, so the majority of the Arab countries they have been compromising on the Palestine cause. And they are pushing behind this Palestine issue, because if you have details and read about the Balfour Declaration, so it's very clear that without the support of the Arab countries, it was not possible for the Israel to make a separate land and to occupy the Palestine. So this Quds Day actually is one of the day that is has been still giving a message to the whole world that the Muslims stand for the Palestinians and for Palestine.
The International Quds Day provides a small window of opportunity for all the people to open their eyes and ears to the plight of Palestinians, who are victims of killings, displacement, desecration, and various forms of settlers and military attacks. Each year on the last Friday of Ramadan, the world has a chance to transcend Quds Day forever. In the long string of annual Quds demos, only one will be different: the Quds Day that will start celebrating the free Palestine and the entailing harmony that unites all the Islamic world.
مسلمان ها امیدوارم که روز قدس را بزرگ بشمارند و در همه ممالک اسلامی در روز قدس، در روز جمعه آخر ماه مبارک تظاهر کنند، مجالس داشته باشند، محافل داشته باشند، فریاد بزنند. وقتی 1 میلیارد جمعیت فریاد کرد، اسرائیل نمیتوند، از همون فریادش میترسد.
Now, to better understand the situation of Palestinians and the International Quds Day from the perspective of the people of the subcontinent, we have with us Mr. Muhammad Shafiq. He's the CEO of the Ramadan Foundation. Mr. Shafiq, welcome to this show. So firstly, can the Indian subcontinent play a better role in the actualization of the Palestinian cause? And what special role can the Muslims and non-Muslims of the subcontinent play to support Palestinians in their way to freedom?
Yeah, I mean, already in Pakistan, there is a deep rooted love and appreciation for the Palestinian people. And that's gone on for decades, particularly because of the struggle against Indian-occupied Kashmir. And so that's the thing that binds people together. But yeah, there's lots more that can be done. I think it's great that Pakistan has refused to recognize Israel until there's a Palestinian state, unlike some of the Arab states that have gone ahead with their former relationship. So that is something good. But yeah, I think civic society needs to step up and show solidarity against occupation and the oppression of the Palestinian people. Because I actually think, on the whole, for example, in India, the vast majority of people stand with the Palestinian people, unlike the people in government and the powers to be who stand with Israel. So it's really important to raise the voice of the struggle of the Palestinians.
Okay, so can the Quds Day unify Muslims across the subcontinent, Asia, or even the world? How can the Quds Day work as a unifying occasion for all the Muslims across the subcontinent and the world?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do on Quds Day is be very clear that we are very proud of our association with the Palestinian people. And we're not going to allow people to throw accusations of anti-Semitism just because they don't want to look at the record of the Israeli forces in killing innocent Palestinians. And that record goes back 70 years. There are people who've been killed. And so around the world, it's an opportunity to highlight the struggle of the Palestinian cause. And regardless of why the governments in the Middle East have relationships with Israel, on the whole, we stand with the Palestinian people until they are free.
So, Mr. Shafiq, our team has collected a few global media coverages in this regard, and I would really appreciate that before moving ahead, you could take a look maybe at how the situation has been, and then we can move ahead. Thank you.
Kashmir and Palestine have a similar historical beginning of their dispute. Palestinian history with Israel as a settler colonial occupation went back to the British colonization of Palestine. British declared Balfour Declaration on 1917. This declaration established the idea of creating a new state in Palestine for Jews and brought with it the project of Israel occupation. Moreover, in 1947, the United Nations approved a plan for the partition of Palestine into a Jewish and an Arab state. Jerusalem was to be internationalized. The Jews accepted the plan, but the Arabs did not. Israel was declared as an independent state on May 14, 1948. This indicates British colonization as the main start point for both the occupation of Palestine and Kashmir, and it also clarified the territorial partition plans that had been existed in both contexts. Prominent voices have warned for years that apartheid lurks just around the corner if the trajectory of Israel's rule over Palestinians does not change, said Kenneth Roth, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. This detailed study shows that Israeli authorities have already turned that corner and today are committing the crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. The Palestinian national movement was in a difficult situation before 4 Arab states normalized relations with Israel, largely because of its internal divisions. These moves by the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco and Sudan, all driven by considerations completely unrelated to Palestine, make its situation more difficult. According to all reputable surveys, however, Arab public opinion does not approve of the moves by these 4 states and is still supportive of the Palestinians, says historian Rashid Khalidi, the Edward Said Professor of Modern Arab Studies at Columbia University.
Mr. Shafiq, thank you so much for staying with us and welcome back. So, how do you think the governments of India and Pakistan can help the Palestinian cause?
Well, I think, as I've already said, the Pakistani government is very much in support of the Palestinian cause, but actually needs to step up by using its influence in the Middle East with some of those Arab countries that have restored relationships with Israel to highlight the struggle of the Palestinian cause. I think Pakistan's in a really good position because of its advocacy and support for the Kashmiri cause and the occupation that the Kashmiri people are suffering, for them to be able to do the similar things for Palestine on an international stage at the United Nations, at various global bodies, and use their diplomatic power to raise that voice. In terms of India, you obviously see, as I said, the people of India are very much in support of the Palestinian cause, but the government is not, and I think there's going to be pressure put on the government to highlight the issue. This is not about all Israelis, this is not about all, targeting a particular faith community. This is about highlighting the injustice of occupation that the Palestinians have suffered for these past 70 plus years, and giving them an independent, viable state.
Mr. Shafiq, what's bothering many people's mind is that how can the long history of partition and division by colonial powers in the subcontinent influence the sentiments of Indians, Muslim or not, towards the Palestinian cause? Do you see any similarities between the fate of Indian Muslims and Palestinians?
Yeah, I think there is a connection between the experience of the Palestinians to what the Indian Muslim community, but also the Hindu community and the Sikh community faced at the time of partition, when Muslim families went towards Pakistan and Hindu and Sikh families went towards India. The difference is, in Palestine, those people weren't allowed to come back home. They were made stateless. The Palestinians were kicked out of their homes, their towns, their lands, and weren't allowed to return. They were refugees in neighboring countries. In India, if they hadn't lost their life in that violence, they were given a new home in India, and were able to settle and contribute and make a life for themselves. Well, the Palestinians won't be able to do that. They won't be able to return to Gaza or the West Bank or Jerusalem. And I think that's something that we need to continuously highlight.
Mr. Shafiq, thank you so much for being with us on our show. I wish you the best of happiness and safety from coronavirus during this time. All right, viewers, now social media has also been riled up regarding the Palestinian cause and about the Quds Day particularly. So let's just take a quick look.
Awaited Hope has touched on the issue of COVID pandemic and expressed hope that they would be allowed to hold an actual and non-virtual protest rally in their community. Yasha Naqvi has summarized the spirit of the Quds Day in a succinct and beautiful way. He says the holy month of Ramadan is about freedom from bad things. This is why Quds is the day of Palestinians' freedom from the occupation. Aliyu Ibrahim Ajia has asked all the Muslims in the world to join hands for the oppressed people. Ali Haidar talks about how the hunger during the fasting days of Ramadan reminds us of the hunger Palestinians suffer under Israeli military rule. Al-Aqil Jawad has quoted the father of the Islamic Revolution, Imam Khomeini, to point out that the Quds Day means the rise of all the voiceless people around the globe.
Alright, that was our special episode for the International Quds Day and its unifying force across the Muslim world. To watch the tastiest bits and pieces of our show and for more subcontinental updates, follow us on our social media platforms and please make sure to feed us with your knowledge and wisdom. We will make sure that your ideas are heard. We shall meet again the same time, same day next week. Thanks for watching.